Okay, we are ready to begin, I think. Welcome to the first official citywide Takoma Park election forum for 2022. Tonight, we will be hearing from candidates for Takoma Park Mayor in alphabetical order: Seth Grimes, Talisha Searcy, and Jarrett Smith. One of these candidates will presumably be the next mayor of Takoma Park. I'm Eric Bond, and I'll be serving as moderator this evening under the auspices of WOWD-LP, Takoma Park's community radio station. Before we begin, I want to say a few words about the election, the date of which is November 8th. It coincides with the Maryland and Montgomery County elections, but will run separately. Remember to vote in both elections. Takoma Park allows all city residents who are 16 or older to vote in the city election. You must be a resident of Takoma Park, but you do not need to be a citizen of the United States. You must be registered. Takoma Park voter registration can be found on the City of Takoma Park website. Just search for city election when you go to the website. One more note, Takoma Park votes are tallied using instant runoff voting, also known as ranked choice voting. We did it before Alaska. Takoma Park voters may rank the candidates running for a given office, including a write-in candidate in order of choice. Each ballot will have a column. For each office, voters will complete the ballot from left to right, indicating their first choice in the first column by filling in the oval next to the selected candidate's name. If voters wish to rank different additional choices, they will select them in the next columns on the ballot. All ballots are collected for each voter's first choice. If any candidate secures a majority, more than 50% of the first choice, then that candidate wins, just like in any other election. But if no candidate secures a majority, the last place candidate is eliminated. That candidate's ballots are then added to the totals of the next choice indicated on each ballot. So, in the case of the mayoral race, if none of these candidates receives a majority of the vote, the third candidate will be eliminated, and the second choices on those ballots will be redistributed to the remaining two candidates so that the victor will receive a majority of votes. You do not need to rank your choices, but if you do so, it allows you to determine who your second choice would be if your first choice is unsuccessful. Again, there's more information about this on the City of Takoma Park website. Toward the end of the evening, I will once again indicate other forums that are upcoming. On Monday, October 10th, we will be meeting with candidates for Ward 1 and Ward 5 here in the municipal building in the auditorium. And then on Thursday of next week, October 13th, the two uncontested wards, 2 and 4, will be meeting. The following week will be wards 3 and 6. All right, so let's turn to the office of mayor. This is a 2-year position of leadership on the City of Takoma Park Council. The mayor's vote is weighted exactly as any council member, but the mayor represents the entire city rather than one ward. The mayor receives an annual salary of $15,829.20, if I'm correct, while members of the city council receive $12,176.36. Aside from that, I will let these candidates determine what their mayorship will look like. This forum will begin with an opening statement from each candidate assigned randomly ahead of time, and we will use the same order for closing statements at the end of the forum. Then I will ask the candidates a series of questions. I will allow each candidate an opportunity to clarify or add to their initial statement or to answer a direct comment made by one of their challengers. Time for a third response may be available if necessary to allow a candidate again to answer any direct comment by a challenger. I have set times for responses, but I may adjust those times as we go along if necessary. I anticipate this forum ending by 9 p.m. I have elicited questions from the public and will do my best to ask those questions along with others that I have prepared. So let's get started with opening statements. And Seth Grimes, Jarrett. Sorry, I have it written down. Jarrett, you picked the long straw, so you will begin.
And how much time do I have, Eric?
90 seconds.
90 seconds, okay. First, I want to thank Eric. I want to thank the city of Takoma Park for organizing this forum. I want to thank all the residents for coming out. I don't think I've seen this many people in the auditorium since the pandemic started. My name is Jarrett Smith. I serve as council member Ward 5. Most people know that as Washington Adventist University, Washington Adventist Hospital. I have been on the council for 10 years now, the second longest serving council member. I really appreciate the opportunity to serve the residents here in Takoma Park. I have sponsored legislation, the plastic bag ban that we have in Takoma Park. We're the second jurisdiction to do that. I have sponsored the changing the voting laws to allow felons to vote in the city of Takoma Park as soon as they become residents. Why am I running for mayor? Because I think all of my experiences on the council with legislation, my experiences serving on MML, my graduate studies at Penn have given me the opportunity to see what it means, what's important to local government. Local government is going to be challenged, especially because of the fiscal constraints that we are seeing, and I would love the opportunity to serve as mayor of this great city. Thank you.
Thank you, Jared. Thank you, Mr. Smith, and apologies for not giving you the 30-second signal. Mr. Grimes?
Thank you, Eric. It's wonderful to be here with you all, and an honor to take the stage with two distinguished opponents, Talisha and Jarrett. I'm Seth Grimes. I've spent a lot of time on this stage as a council member and a lot of time in the community as an advocate working on climate action, on housing and food security, on policing and justice reform, and other pressing needs. To quote Steve Jobs, I believe people with passion can change the world for the better. And there is so much passion in Takoma Park to focus on global challenges and local ones. My own passion is locally focused, and I believe that with so many of you, I have contributed to making Takoma Park better. Working with activists Julie Taddeo and Catherine Cummings, I co-wrote Takoma Park's Safe Grow Lawn Care Pesticide Ban with my former colleague Tim Mayle, who's in the audience this evening, and helped convince George Leventhal to turn it into county law. The late Kay Daniels Cohen and I convinced our council colleagues to open the Takoma Park Library on Sundays, and we got the library renovation going, about to begin construction in 2015. Tim and I spearheaded voting reforms that included 16-year-old voting. You can count on me to ensure that all community members will have adequate housing and enough to eat, that we will advance climate action and create affordable housing, an as yet unfilled promise. You can also count on me to ensure fiscal responsibility, that is control over taxes and spending in keeping with the resources available in our community and the pressing community needs. Thank you for the opportunity to address you this evening.
Thank you. That 90 seconds goes quickly, so I appreciate both of you filling that time so well. Ms. Searcy?
Yes. Thank you. My name is Talisha Searcy. I'm running for mayor because I believe in the city and our values. I've served as Ward 6 council member since 2017, and I've achieved a number of things in addition to addressing community needs as a result of the pandemic. In Ward 6, I strengthened critical infrastructure to address housing quality and availability. I worked with multifamily property owners to identify resources for building improvements, including energy efficiency upgrades. I enhanced public spaces. I worked with with Montgomery County to renovate 2 county playgrounds and advocated for the redevelopment of the recreation center, including improving the community engagement process to ensure that all voices are heard. I improved public safety, addressed pedestrian safety with new sidewalks, traffic calming measures throughout the ward. And when the nation was calling for social justice reform, I led our city's reimagining public safety efforts. I worked hand in hand with local businesses, securing funding for those businesses that were impacted as a result of the Purple Line construction, and lobbied state officials, resulting in funds for facade improvements and a new mural on New Hampshire Avenue. I've received endorsements from fellow state, county, and local leaders who believe I'm the right candidate for the job. And I believe I'm the right candidate for the job because I have the knowledge, the skills, and the heart to meet the needs of the city's residents. So thank you for having me.
Oh, perfect. So you each, to some degree, answered my first question, which is that as all of you have been members of the City Council, and I wanted to know what accomplishments during your time on the council you're most proud of, and maybe we'll have a chance to discuss that further. I'm wondering, are there any votes or actions that you regret from your time on council? And we'll just go in reverse order, starting with Ms. Searcy.
Sure. So in terms of votes that I regret, I don't regret any of my votes. I try my best to make sure that my votes are done with the best information that's available at the time. But I will say that there was one vote that, for right reasons, I was unable to support, but morally I agreed with. And one was our sustainability framework activity. I agree with the goals. Worked with my colleagues across council to try to work in some, address some of the concerns that I had. But at the end of the day, for me, the biggest issue was residents in a number of our wards had not been consulted at all. Ward 6 did not have a focus group. Businesses were not consulted at all, and we knew that the commercial needs were going to be great in terms of advancing our sustainability goals. Our multifamily property owners were not consulted, and I had been working with them for years, and they want to make energy efficiency improvements, but the resources were just not there. And so not having that stakeholder input for me was a problem, even though I agreed with all of the goals that were there. So that is one vote that if I could have had a no but instead of a no, that's one that I would change.
Thank you. Mr. Smith, are there any votes that you regret from your tenure on council?
Thank you, Eric. I have to say that I'm disappointed in my support of the Junction project. I was on the council when that project first started. I was there when we first put out the RFP, and we were surprised that, there were the number of developers that even responded. If you compare that project to the Flower Avenue Green Street redevelopment, it's night and day. I mean, we did not have the same type of pushback from residents. We were able to, as a city, raise millions of dollars for that project. And the Takoma Junction just seemed to tear the community apart. And I never, when I went into that project, thought that was going to happen, but it did happen. And I have to apologize to the residents at Takoma Park for leading on that issue. Whatever development projects that we have in the city, we all have to be engaged. We have to buy into them. And I think that is something what happened with the Flower Avenue Green Street. There were, residences, landlords that said, hey, I don't want a sidewalk, or I don't want stormwater improvements, and the city was able to work around them. It didn't stop the entire project. We still have a beautiful Green Street. So that is one area that I would change my focus in my vote.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Smith. And Mr. Grimes?
Eric, you ask about votes that I regretted. You know, I can think of a few, but they're very small issues that I would doubt very many people in this audience, maybe just a couple, would remember. I regret more the instances when I wasn't able to convince colleagues to do the right thing. And in retrospect, well, I'll mention Tacoma Junction as one of them. As many of you know, I co-chaired Tacoma Junction Task Force in 2010, 2011. And then I was elected to the council, and I helped move that project forward. The developer that we selected, that I voted for, NDC, pulled a bait and switch on the city in 2015. They removed the apartment housing from the second story of the development, and they moved the co-op delivery solution from on the parking lot to a lay-by service lane. I was the only council member who opposed NDC's bait and switch. Mr. Smith supported it. He was fine with it. And 6 or 7 years of agony since then, we have a failed project, and I very much regret that and would like to do everything I can to reforge community consensus around moving forward jointly on housing creation, on climate action, on the things that we were distracted from because of Tacoma Junction. Regrets, yeah. It's more what I wasn't able to accomplish and that I'm eager to try to accomplish in an office of mayor.
Thank you.
May I respond?
Yeah, I'm going to hold on one second.
I appreciate my former colleague's comments regarding my votes on the junction, but my colleague did not mention that the city of Tacoma Park does not have authority over Carroll Avenue. That has to be administered, regulated by the SHA. So my vote was to have SHA to do their due diligence and to finally tell us whether or not that was possible. We tried many different ways to solve the delivery at the junction. But when it got to the lay-by, that was up to SHA. So that's why I voted for SHA actually reviewing their plan.
Thank you. Ms. Searcy, any clarification that you'd like to add?
I was not on council at that time.
Okay. Mr. Grimes? Okay. Give me a second to get my timer set up again. All right. Well, let's move on to the role and scope of the city. The city is running at a deficit despite pandemic relief funds. Despite a stable population base, the city has increased staff and budget. How do you intend to address this? How do you intend to address this? And we'll start with Mr. Smith.
I would say that it's more than just a deficit, that we are in a very serious fiscal situation. I would put right now, Tacoma Park is a full-service city. We provide everything from picking up your trash to a police department. As mayor, I would talk to residents, and we need to decide, does it make sense for us to provide all of these services? And I would also tell you right here, right now, that our tax increases in the future will be pegged to the constant yield. That's it, no more. So that means that there's going to be pain. There will be changes. But the alternative is huge tax increases to eliminate this deficit. So I'm just telling you what is actually happening here at 7500 Maple Avenue. This city needs to figure out what it wants to be, not as the character of Tacoma Park. The character of Tacoma Park will not change, but the day-to-day services that we provide, we as a community need to figure out, does it make sense that we try to do everything that Montgomery County or the District of Columbia, that has a multi-billion-dollar budget, does each and every year?
Thank you. Mr. Grimes?
Thank you. Eric, you asked about the city deficit and effectively about fiscal management, staffing programs. I will actually start with my own record as a council member. In my 4 years on the city council, we raised the property taxes by a cumulative 2.5%, which was less than half the inflation rate. It can be done. In the 7 years since I left the councils have raised property taxes by what's now annually $643,000 beyond inflation. We have lacked fiscal discipline. We have added positions. I do think that there are ways that we can cut positions without harming the people who are most in need in this city, and I will examine that. We are in the fortunate situation, actually, that the council was part of a county-wide effort to redress county tax duplication payments to the city, and we will be receiving in each of the next 2 years, I believe the figure is $670,000 additional a year. That will allow us to hold tax increases, property tax increases, below the inflation rate. Constant yield, I'm going to look first at what is necessary program-wise, service-wise, before deciding what tax rates are going to be. I'm not a tax cutter. We're going to face some pressure when federal ARPA funds are expended to retain programs that were funded with that money. We need to have discipline moving forward, as well as to ensure proper oversight of projects such as the library project.
Okay, great. Thank you. And Ms. Searcy?
Thank you for the question. I think it's important for us to think of not just the short-term implications of our budget, but the longer-term impacts of our budget. Currently, the city of Takoma Park has had very little population growth. We've had no housing growth. We've had no economic development in this city. Our tax base has not changed at all. And if we're really thinking about how we can come up with a longer-term solution for really addressing the needs of our budget, we have to think about expanding our tax base, allowing more people to come into our community, and allowing for there to be increased development in order for that to happen. So that's first and foremost. That's how we set the path for longer term. If you look at other communities like the Rockvilles, like the Gaithersburgs, their tax base are a lot lower on the residential properties because they have larger commercial tax base. In terms of what I can do with actually addressing where we are right now with our budget, one of the things that we really strive to do, or I strive to do during the pandemic, was try to keep taxes as flat as we could. The 5 years I've been on council, 3 of which were during a pandemic, right? So we had to try to manage the resources and anticipate what might be needed for those individuals in need. And we managed to keep that tax rate flat, but we can't control the increased property values. So it's important for us to take a multi-pronged approach, looking at services, but also addressing the future needs.
Okay, thank you. How does that time work, by the way? 90 seconds, is that adequate? Are you, okay. Sure. I think we started with Mr. Jarrett, so Mr. Smith, so we'll start there, yeah.
First, I would like to address the economic development. You know, when I first came onto the council, the council talked about economic development, and we don't have an economic development. I mean, it's much more difficult than just coming up with a slogan or just saying that you want to do it. It's going to take a lot of hard work, and we as a council have not figured out how to get one extra dollar out of economic development. So it's just not a simple solution. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Grimes?
Can you clarify, are we doing 30-second responses?
I was trying to do 60-second responses, but it was taking lots of time with the timer, so we'll just kind of go with this.
Great. So I would like to respond about housing creation. I appreciate that the recent councils have created a city housing and economic development plan. It's actually more a set of goals and strategies rather than a plan, which would lay out actual actions and a timeline. I feel very well situated to put that into action, but I do note that that was created several years ago, and my colleagues on the stage have not managed to put it into action. I actually am probably the only person on the stage who has had a hand in creating multi-unit housing locally. Specifically, you know, the former 7-Eleven opposite the Tacoma Metro station. When I was on the city council, I had constituents who were complaining, even though that's in the district, that they weren't shoveling their snow or picking up their trash. So I got to know the family that used to own that property, and over the course of 2 to 3 years, I convinced them to pursue redeveloping it. That is to create a multi-story structure there. And then I introduced them to 2 developers, and they made a deal with one of them and sold the property. And now we're going to have 36 apartment units there and a larger commercial space than was there previously. I will clarify, I had absolutely zero financial interest in this. I did it because it's the right thing to do. So I know how to create housing, work with developers, work with property owners to actually move these aspirations forward and make them reality.
All right, Ms. Searcy, would you like to respond?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I think it's great that my opponents were able to increase the commercial tax base for the district. I think that's wonderful. What I've been able to do is actually work within the city of Takoma Park. I've worked with property owners here. We have a 96-unit apartment complex for individuals 60% or below AMI that's getting a full renovation. We're increasing the size of the units there, and it was able to lobby $250,000 of our ARPA funds to go towards that project. Complete electrification. It includes free Wi-Fi. It includes free community center access for folks. And what that means is we are actually creating housing in the city. And my opponent talked about the role of economic development, and we haven't really seen much come out of our commercial districts. Well, representing Ward 6, the largest commercial district in the city of Takoma Park, I could tell you now about 7% of our assessed value per commercial property tax is coming from large districts, you know? So to think that we're not getting anything from the businesses that we have here right now is a fallacy. That's not true. Our commercial districts are already investing in our community. We need to work with them so that we can increase and grow.
And may I respond, please?
Yeah, so we'll go one last round on this one, and I'm setting the timer this time for 30 seconds for this
Okay.
final round. How's
Right.
that?
First thing regarding the economic development, that 6-7% number that was quoted, that was the same amount that the city was getting when I first got on the council. What I'm talking about is new economic development. Of course, we should try to work with those businesses that are currently in the city. If they want to expand, try to figure out how they expand. I'm not saying that that is not possible. I'm saying that to find the new dollars in economic development, like we were trying to do with the Tacoma Junction, has not happened in the city.
Great. Mr. Grimes?
Take advantage of 30 seconds to say that I actually, before being elected to the council, I was on the Old Tacoma Business Association board for 2 years. And as a council member, represented the Old Tacoma businesses up to, but not quite including Tacoma Junction. And I'm glad as a result of that to have support of the Old Tacoma business leaders, including many of you know David Eisner, Kit and Cindy at Tacoma Old Town Auto, Dolly at RS Automotive, and Leandra Nicola at Main Street Pearl. And you can count on me to work with businesses across the city, including our largest district in Tacoma Langley Crossroads.
Thank you, Mr. Grimes. Circe? I want to, we have so many questions to get to, but I want to ask a follow-up on this one because, if we're talking about balancing the budget, the question remains, what gets cut? And so, I just want to quickly assess from each of you, if services are cut in the city, what services should they be? And Mr. Grimes, I'll start with you.
Services get cut is a question that I have thought a lot about, and I've actually written about it. And I mentioned blogging, 172 blog posts in 4 years on the council. So that's still online at onetacoma.com. You can look it up along with dozens of blog posts since then. It's about accountability. I posted one a couple of years ago on this very question, what can we cut? And I had a specific answer for something we can look at. I'm not saying we should cut it, but really what I want to expose here is a principle behind this discussion, that we don't just cut willy-nilly, we don't make commitments without having data. And data is what we don't have. What I observed in a blog post 2 years ago was that we have added 2 police positions at that point in the 10 years prior, while crime in Takoma Park had been down 35%, tracking a national trend. But we haven't used the numbers to study what our coverage should be. I'm thrilled that one of the police reforms that we've had here is Chief Duvall's reducing the number of traffic stops by something like 90%. This is something I've actually been working on as part of a coalition county-wide. Perhaps this means that we don't have to have the same level of police coverage. Now, I know that you're going to be asking about public safety, so we'll talk more about what's proper there. But this is an example of trying to use the data to see what the service levels and programs should be, and that's what I will commit to.
Thank you. Ms. Searcy?
Sure. So we've been going through this exercise every budget season, trying to figure out what to cut. I think that there are some opportunities for us to, once we've reached a plateau with some of our sidewalks, traffic calming, some of those things which are big ticket budget items, because the reality is our budget consists of people and things. So you either have to cut people or you have to cut stuff. And some of our major items relate to our CIP. That's not something that people like to hear. You know, when you're fearful of your children being able to cross the street and you want a speed bump, the last thing you want to hear is that it's not in the budget. But when we're looking at our budget critically, those are some of the areas where maybe grant funds or other ways in which we can supplement the budget could be used. Also, when we do a lot of feel-good stuff, and it's awesome, it's great, but those cost. And so some aspects of what we include in our budget, which we learned during the pandemic because we had to put a lot of activities on hold that are feel-good, great community efforts, but are actually resource intensive, not only for our staff, but also, you know, aspects of different types of supplies and things. So I would be open to looking critically at a number of the different projects that we have to see what could we do without.
Thank you. You all are doing so well at sticking right to the time. Mr. Smith?
Thank you, Eric. Cutting projects is not going to get us out of this hole. We have to look at FTEs. Currently, we have around 178 FTEs in the city of Takoma Park. We need to seriously, and this will be led by senior city staff, what departments we can cut. I don't know if that number is 5% or 10%, but we have to seriously reduce our FTE count. That's the only way you're going to make a dent in the deficit. You can cut projects. I'm not really a supporter of cutting projects because a lot of these projects are road maintenance projects, and we don't want to find ourselves in the same position as Montgomery County where you have all these potholes or you have just problems with the roads. That is not where we should spend our time and our focus. Our FTE count is too high, and we need to reduce it.
Is there any interest in clarifying? Sure. Mr. Grimes?
So we're discussing budget cuts, staffing programs. I want to turn that into a discussion of how the city works, how city government works. When I was on the council and before, the city relied very heavily on the expertise, enthusiasm, talent in the community to devise plans and carry them out. I served on the Committee on the Environment, for instance, after I left the council, and we developed a lot of plans that didn't see the light of day in terms of action. I would like to see a return to that, and I think we can make cuts in the level of consultants that the city uses. Nowadays, when we have strategic projects, they are typically led by consultants. So I think we can see some savings there. We can also look for other revenue sources, and some of them are going to directly benefit Takoma Park property owners or residents rather than the city. I'll give a specific example. Takoma Park property owners pay a line item recreation tax to Montgomery County. It is about 2.6 cents per $100 of assessed value. I calculated it for a $750,000 home. That's $194.25. This would be a tax reduction for Takoma Park property owners rather than additional funding for the city. So there are a lot of ways to attack this problem. I'll mention that I have the backing of one of Takoma Park's leading budget hawks, David Navari, who has done excellent analyses that many of you have seen, and I will rely on that expertise in the community to answer this question.
Thank you. Ms. Searcy, do you have anything to add?
Sure. I'm an implementer through and through, and I know that you can't cut people and not expect to cut projects. The math just doesn't work. You need to have people that are able to oversee certain projects. So in order for us, if the idea is that we need to reduce our staffing levels, then that has to align with a reduction in services. They go hand in hand. So we can't talk about one without the other. So the question still remains, what projects or what activities are we going to cut? Because if we don't have enough staff to do the work, then we can't get the work done, right? So you're budgeting for things that you can't do. So I think it's really important for us to make sure, and your next mayor needs to be a person that can think through implementation on how we can balance the staff workload with the projects that we request, and how we can identify places where we can cut back. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I respond?
Yes.
I would just say that the way that we would offload some of these services is we would work out an agreement with the county. Yes, we have fixed tax duplication, but I'm going to tell you here and now, it's just not enough money. I mean, when you look at inflation, and Takoma Park is not like we're not being hit by inflation increase in salaries, but in benefits. We have to look to our big brother, the county, to provide some of these services in the city of Takoma Park, because look at the census numbers. Our population has not really changed in 10 years. I've been on the council for 10 years. We're about the same, a couple hundred more people. We can't continue to have a multi-30 million plus budget and you have a population around the same number of people. Look at Gaithersburg and Rockville, thousands of more residents, and their taxes are lower than ours, and it's not just their business district, okay? They have more people. Municipalities primarily get their taxes from single-family homeowners. If you have a bigger population, you have more people buying homes. We just don't have that here in Takoma Park. That's the reality of the situation.
And now I'm wondering, can we move on and
Seconds. So we've had a singular focus in the last few minutes about programs and staffing, but there's another aspect which is good decision making. So I'll give you a very specific example, the library project. The council in 2014-2015, I was a member, moved forward a modest renovation with a modest expansion to make the library ADA accessible, $3.5 to $4 million. The council since, including 4 votes by Mr. Smith and several votes by Ms. Searcy, voted for an expanded project that has resulted in a delay in actually having the library reopen and a vastly, vastly higher price ticket. Good decisions are important.
all right, let's-
Can I respond?
yeah.
Thank you so much.
But Ms. Searcy, you get the first opportunity. to respond.
Thank you so much. I thought we were talking about taxes, but okay, we're going to switch to the library. What I voted in favor of was using grant funds, which had limited uses other than the library project, to deal with increased costs due in part to the pandemic and cost associated with supply chain issues. The monies that come out of our taxes was agreed to before I got on council, and that's the $7 million loan that was taken out by prior council.
Thank you. Mr. Smith.
I mean, we're talking about a library project that's $13.8 million. I mean, it's unseemly for a jurisdiction that only has a budget of $30 million. Mr. Grimes is correct. I did vote with him on that much smaller renovation. The subsequent votes, you have to understand how city government works. The city staff does not have like real pricing numbers of construction. The only way we can find out what something costs is we have to go out, hire a consultant, hire an architect or somebody to bring us that information. I voted to get that information so that the residents here in Takoma Park know exactly what they are paying for.
All right, well, we could go into the library, but I actually want to pivot to another project, which is the New Hampshire Avenue Recreation Center. And I'm wondering, we'll start with you, Ms. Searcy, how important is that recreation center to the goals of the city? And what are your thoughts on the scope of the project, given previously stated budgetary issues?
Sure. So the recreation center has been something that I've been striving to renovate since I got on council. From bringing state officials to New Hampshire Avenue, having the Secretary of Planning watch kids play basketball, to trying to obtain funds from the county. It is one of the most pivotal resources in Ward 6 or in that part of the city that otherwise does not have access to any other city public facilities, right? There's nothing else there. Every playground is county owned, so that is the only thing that we have. I think that with the rec center, because of where it's located, presents a very unique opportunity, not just as it relates to providing the resource to the community, but also as it relates to how we could potentially fund the project. And I've been working nonstop with our staff to not only try to engage, learn from the junction, to engage the residents and engage the community early so that we know what our community wants before we engage in a request for proposal or get any bids from any outside folks, but also to speak with people along New Hampshire Avenue, faith-based organizations, entities that would be willing to partner with us on something like this. So we're in a unique place now with the rec center in terms of being able to really achieve the goal of housing creation as well as providing recreational services.
Thank you. Mr. Smith?
Thank you, Eric. I've supported this project when it was first discussed in the council, maybe 2013, 2014. I think it's great that it's moving forward, but I will say that there's a lot of risk out there. We are moving almost in the same way we did with Tacoma Junction. The city does not do these big projects. We just don't. We're not in the business of big projects. We don't have the staff that work on these projects. We don't have a lot of the expertise needed for these types of projects. Is it possible? Of course. Do I support it? Yes. But we have to be cautious. We have to make sure we know what we're doing. We have to make sure that the partner that we work with is somebody that really understands the city. We have to make sure that, like my former colleague, Mr. Grimes said, there is not a bait and switch. This is not just you put out an RFP like we did in the past, people respond, and you just, have a bunch of council meetings and you pick some developer and sign a development agreement. We did that, and look how it turned out. We have to be careful and make sure that we get this project right, because it is critical for the redevelopment of the New Hampshire Avenue corridor. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Grimes?
I think replacement of the New Hampshire Avenue Rec Center is a wonderful opportunity, which is why I helped move it forward in 2014, 2015, when I was on the council. We chartered and did 2 studies, one for recreation, a second for feasibility. The second study, feasibility, had a zoning and concept plan analysis. You can find it on the city website now. The concept plan I particularly liked, mixed rec center with housing above the rec center. The idea is that a developer would pay for the rec center by building the apartments, and we'd also seek outside funding. The city did issue a request for expressions of interest and got something like half a dozen responses in 2017. The timeline that the city had in 2017 included actually putting the project out for bid for a partner at that time. I actually don't know why that happened. That was before Ms. Searcy joined the council. In the time since, we acquired ownership of the parcel, which is great, but we haven't made any substantial progress until the city manager announced a week and a half ago that an RFP would be issued. I actually have in draft form some comments to him about things like the green construction. That wasn't total afterthought with the library project. I'm kind of sorry to say that. But also relooking the zoning by increasing the zoning height limit to match the 2 apartment buildings behind the rec center parcel. We can build perhaps 50 or even more apartments, build more affordable housing in Takoma Park, and get a better deal on the rec center replacement. I've been talking about this for a couple of years, and it's a commitment I will make as mayor to move it forward.
All right. Do we seek clarification on that question? Yes,
Sure.
Ms. Searcy.
Thank you. First, it's not 2 apartment buildings that's behind the rec center. One is an apartment building, the other is a condo community. That condo community actually owns the green space that's next to the recreation center. So they have an equal stake in making sure that the recreation center development goes appropriately. One of the things that I was very adamant about, I was a neighborhood association president at the time in which the prior councils did their work. I had no idea that this was happening, and I managed a community of 600 homes. We had no idea that there was community engagement happening around a recreation center that was shared property, right? The condo community didn't have any idea either. And so one of the things that I strive to do during the pandemic was bring in, yes, consultants, people who actually know how to go door to door and speak the languages of the people who live in the area to figure out what it is that they want. And they went door to door, and they did table sittings during the pandemic, and we have a report that shows what people want. And they want a rec center, right? They want a rec center. They want rentable space. They want housing too. But that's a second to having public space. So it's important for us to keep in mind that we should not make decisions in isolation, but actually engage the people that will be impacted the most.
Thank you. Mr. Jarrett, or Mr. Smith, second time.
I would just respond and say that when Mr. Grimes and I first served and this came up, I think, we did ask staff to engage the residents around the rec center and, wanted to hear from people. As a council member, that's all you can do. You can, from the dais, ask staff to do certain things. And, I guess staff dropped the ball on that, but we discussed making sure that all the stakeholders were part of whatever was going to happen at the rec center.
Mr. Grimes.
Let me start by saying that I really appreciated working with Councilmember Smith on the council, and I really regret that I won't have the opportunity to do that going forward, and Ms. Searcy as well. So I actually looked at the green space, the lawn next to the rec center, just to the north of it. It is owned by the Takoma Overlook condominium. I've talked to people in the Takoma Overlook condominium, including in recent months. The residents were actually imposed a $1.7 million special assessment for repairs on the building, and there are further repairs needed in that building. In particular, a sprinkler system might be imposed by the county. That's going to be really expensive. So the residents of that building, the condo owners, are actually open to a discussion about selling that lawn to either the city or a developer to enable creation of an even better rec center project. I have talked to people in that building. I know this from those direct conversations. So I agree, it is extremely important for elected officials and for aspiring elected officials to go out and engage with the community, talk to people directly, ask them questions, not just leading questions, by the way, but questions about what's on their mind and learn about their situations. So that's what I've done in regard to the rec center. Talked to people at Tacoma Overlook and the adjoining Hillwood Manor and New Hampshire Gardens neighborhoods, and I will continue to do just that, reach out to the community as mayor.
You can give me 30 seconds for this rebuttal. So I've done more than just talk to those residents. I've met with the condo board. I've had conversations with the county to try to get resources for them to help deal with the issues that they have in their building. I've worked with Delegate Charkoudian to try to bring resources to that building. I've worked with that condo board to make sure that they're able to apply for the grant funds that the city makes available for multifamily building rehabs. So I've done more than just talking about what they need. I've been working with them trying to come up with a solution.
Great.
Quickly. Thank you. You know, as a council member, you always try to defer to your colleagues, and you don't want to work outside your ward. You know, there was a resident that lived in the condo building that told me that the condo association was having financial problems and came to me and asked me for my help. I reached out to senior staff. Senior staff said that they would not do anything because it was a private entity.
Okay, let's move on. There's so many issues. I wish we had 5 hours. I want to talk about housing. And, you know, usually we talk about affordable housing in terms of such things as rent stabilization. But I want to start from this angle. Single-family home values have increased substantially over the past 20 years, which has increased property taxes, as we've discussed, and deterred some middle-income families from moving to Takoma Park. This widens the gap between low-income and upper-income residents with less of a middle-income buffer. Does your housing plan consider people living on fixed incomes or middle-income families looking to buy in Takoma Park? And we'll start with you, Mr. Smith.
Let me first say that I support rent stabilization 1,000%. We are the only jurisdiction in Maryland that has rent stabilization. That is the reason why we have such a diverse community. If we didn't have it, we would have a similar population of Somerset or Chevy Chase. Affordable housing is very difficult. My day job, I'm a lobbyist for Network Lobby for Catholic Social Justice. We're a progressive Catholic organization. Part of my portfolio is housing, and I talk to congressmen on both sides of the aisle trying to figure out affordable housing all over the country, and including the White House. It is not something that is going to be done overnight, and it is not something we can find an easy solution. I will say that the city of Takoma Park needs to bring on partners to help with financing housing projects. All housing is really the same, right? All buildings are really the same, but if you want parcels of it to be affordable, the public sector has to come in and put money into the project so that you can bring down the rents or the actual cost of the project. And that's the only way you have middle or very low income housing. And those partners have to include the county, the state, and the federal government.
Thank you, Mr. Grimes.
Housing is a challenge. We've been talking about creation of new apartment housing. We've talked a bit about conversion or upgrades to existing apartment housing, which is good for tenants but doesn't create new housing. I too, by the way, just interject, strongly support rent stabilization. I want to talk about a different way of creating housing. It's actually a reversion to what Takoma Park used to be. When I moved to my neighborhood 26 years ago, in 1996, the house across the street from mine had 4 apartments. The house next to it was subdivided into 3 apartments. My house used to have a separate apartment on the 2nd floor. Well, the ethos of the 80s and 90s was that these were slum-like dwellings. They were not done to code, they were not safe and all of that. And instead of trying to upgrade them and make them legal and habitable, we chose to get rid of them. That was the wrong move. I would like to see a reversion to what we had before, where we support multifamily housing within the same forms of house that we have in our residential neighborhoods. I'm not talking about apartment buildings, I'm talking about houses like mine. A reversion to having economic diversity in the neighborhood, opportunity to age in community by moving into an apartment in a house rather than having to maintain a whole house yourself. Economic diversity means racial diversity. This is the vision I have for Takoma Park and housing, not just apartment creation, but also creating housing diversity throughout our neighborhoods, throughout our city.
Thank you. Ms. Searcy?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for the question. We need all housing, every single bit. We have so many people who have been valuable members of our community who've had to leave because they got married, they had kids, now they have 2 kids, and they can't fit in an apartment anymore, and there's nowhere for them to go. We have to create entries to home ownership in our community. We have very, very few. We talked about some condos today, but we don't have any new townhomes or other kinds of housing options for people who are ready to buy, which is a wonderful opportunity to build generational wealth through property ownership. So we don't have those opportunities, which we need to work with partners to build. Moreover, a number of our apartment buildings are in disrepair. Like they're not of the status that many people would choose to live in. And we have to work with our multifamily property owners to make sure that our housing quality is there, that we're working with these buildings to make sure that people are living with dignity, because that also matters. If someone is looking for a place to live and they don't feel comfortable in the apartments that are available in the city, they go elsewhere, right? So how can we increase our rental housing stock, which is important for us to do? We could do that through development, but also keep in mind that we have to create those entries to home ownership as well. We can't do one without the other.
Thank you very much. Mr. Smith?
I would just say that affordable housing, middle housing, low-income housing requires government subsidy, period. Or you get a foundation to come in as a partner. We can talk about all types of, we need this, we need that. If there isn't any subsidy in the financial stack, all these financial levels, whether it's the LIHTC, the low-income tax credits that you can get, if there isn't other money brought into the project's not going to happen. I mean, people build housing because they want to make money. You know, it is not like a public goodwill. The goodwill comes from government stepping in and saying, we want these units to be affordable. And we are willing to put this amount of money into the deal to ensure 30, 50, 100 years that this amount of units will be affordable. That's it. It's not talking from the dais. It's not, hoping something's going to happen. It's what money you can bring to a project. And that includes people that even want to age in place. I mean, when you're on a fixed income, where does the money come from? I think it's our responsibility as a city to partner with organizations and help people that want to age in place in our community.
Mr. Grimes.
I'd like to add.
Mike.
I'd like to add a note in favor of cross-jurisdictional approaches. Our Takoma Park is not a large city. We have boundary with Washington, D.C., with Prince George's County, with unincorporated Montgomery County, including Silver Spring. I believe in cross-jurisdictional growth. When there's loads of housing creation going on in the District of Columbia and Tacoma, D.C. in particular, and I think that's great. It brings new patrons to our businesses. effectively that creates a better business climate for businesses in Takoma Park. It also creates businesses in the District of Columbia that are shopped at by Takoma Park residents. I would like to see a lot more cross-jurisdictional collaboration with Prince George's County in particular along New Hampshire Avenue between Eastern Avenue and 410. The other side, let's call it the east side, is Prince George's. Tacoma-Langley Crossroads, two of the four corners of that intersection of University and New Hampshire are Prince George's County. We need more cross-jurisdictional collaboration. I'm glad that I personally have a lot of strong relationships with officials in Prince George's County, with some council members, with several of the members of the General Assembly, as well as, of course, with General Assembly and council members and incoming council members in Montgomery County, and with the members of the administration, the housing and so on in Montgomery County. So I put in a voice for cross-jurisdictional collaboration to solve a regional need.
Okay, Ms. Searcy, any final comments?
Sure. I'm going to agree with both of them. We need money and we need political will. But I think that we can't address this issue from a place of learned helplessness when it comes to trying to address the issue. It requires us working with our partners, identifying and understanding the nuance of things like opportunity zone designations and things like that we could take advantage of as a city to turn it into resources that we can then use to leverage building housing in our city. It's a very different mindset. It's one that's going away from just advocacy for advocacy's sake, but actually trying to identify those windows of opportunity and taking advantage of them. So I've been working, like my colleagues, with members of Prince George's County Council for years, trying to instill development and lead some change in the Tacoma-Langley Crossroads area. But we need more, right? We need state level resources. And so how are we lobbying? How can we do this as city council members, as a mayor, to do that piece is what's important. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll take 30 seconds.
Okay, because we are running short on time already.
I'll make it quick. This afternoon, I spoke to one of the region's experts in affordable housing. The enterprise zones do not work for affordable housing, period. The other issue regarding Prince George's County, they have a different philosophy when it comes to affordable housing. If you look at the housing that's going up in Hyattsville, for example, there's very little of it that is affordable. They want market housing, and it's going to continue to put pressure on Takoma Park. Thank you.
Okay. Any comments?
I favor creation of all housing, market rate housing and affordable housing. Affordable housing can be subsidized housing, financed by the federal government or by the state and county. It's all good. When we create more market rate housing, then we diminish the pressure on more affordable units that comes from people who have higher economic capacity seeking to rent those units. So I do believe that we need to create housing of all types for all income levels.
Seriously?
No worries. I've said that. We need all of it. All types of housing, all income levels. Thanks.
Mr. Grimes, I want to turn to Takoma Park's racial equity initiative. And is this approach succeeding? And where is it failing to achieve its goals?
Takoma Park, several years ago, did enact a racial equity law. That was Mr. Smith's doing. I recognize that, and I thank him for that. That's extremely important. I think I'm not the only person who is a bit disappointed in how it has played out for a number of reasons, and I anticipate that you'll hear from more than me on that point, that it does seem somewhat pro forma, the evaluation of city actions, ordinances, and so on, the racial equity impact. I will do everything I can to address that. I do, by the way, recognize that there's no shortage of white males in elected office, and I thought long and hard about whether I should be running myself. And obviously, I decided I should after consulting a lot of people, including non-white people, based on my legislative record here in Takoma Park, based on my accomplishments as an advocate in the community on all sorts of things, including matters that deeply reflect the diversity of our community. So racial equity should remain on the top of the list of criteria for everything that we do as a city. I will say that there's one area that I do see that we've been deficient, and that is in inclusion. Inclusion is not welcoming everyone to come to your meeting. It's not expecting people to come to you when they have needs. It's going out in the community and talking to people where they are, in their churches, in their homes, in their community organizations. That is something that I have practiced for years and that I will continue to practice as mayor of Takoma Park. And I will do my best to bring along my council colleagues and city staff to greater inclusion efforts than we've had to date.
Thank you. Ms. Searcy?
Okay, thank you. I agree with my opponent that the racial equity statements are lacking. One of the things that I've worked on since being on council are a couple of larger racial equity focused initiatives. One is working with my colleagues to address our committee process. One of the things that we realized is that there's certain types of individuals, certain demographics of individuals that participate in our committees, in our city committees. One of the things that we strive to do was, one, make sure that we were actually having committees that focused on topics that mattered to people of different backgrounds. I saw with the Public Safety Task Force, we had the most people apply to be on a task force that I've ever seen. 40 plus people applied. So we know that there are issues that people, particularly people of color, care about. So we have to ask ourselves, are our committees focused on the issues that they care about? One. Two, how do we get rid of the barriers to entry? Most people cannot meet at a 7:30 on a Tuesday. If you got kids, you know that's when they're eating, showering, and crying to not go to bed. So you have to figure out some way to make sure that you're able to reach and engage as many people as you can. Virtual meetings, providing subsidies so you can hire a babysitter for the night. Those are some of the things that I prioritize while on council, trying to address those gaps. And I think that's important to include more people in the process.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Smith, comments on the racial equity initiative?
You know, you had a question earlier about, is there a regret in a vote? You know, when I proposed doing racial equity with the mayor, I had a different vision. I did not think that we would spend time as a council talking about committees or commissions. That has been very disappointing. Racial equity is about outcomes. How do you improve the outcomes for people? I did not think that racial equity would be weaponized or turned into, you know, the reason why we should spend $13.8 million for a library because black and brown people live near the library and they should go walk into a new library that costs $13.8 million. But their quality of life has not changed. Racial equity is about making sure that our neighbors, those people that live in Takoma Park, have the opportunity for the same quality of life as everybody. And that's what I would like to see in racial equity. I've tried to talk about this at the senior staff level. There has been very little interest. The current city manager, I think, would like to do more. But that's what racial equity is about. And that's what I would do as your mayor, to make sure that the black and brown folks, the Asian folks, those people, our First Nation folks, have the quality of life just like everybody in this community.
Thank you. Would you like to add anything? Would you like to add anything?
Yes, sir. Racial equity for me is about access. As a lower income person growing up, having a seat at the table, having access to people who know how to maneuver situations is key. So while my colleague may not appreciate having and reducing barriers to entry to committee participation, that could transform someone's outlook. You now have an opportunity to have a say in how your city operates. An immigrant who never thought that they could vote in this country now has an ability to offer recommendations to the mayor of a town. Those are things that, to me, are critical when we're talking about racial equity. It is about providing people access, giving them a seat at the table, and listening and taking advantage and receiving and acting upon what you're being told. So for me, as your mayor, I'm about access. I want to make sure that we're able to touch people wherever they are, but we have to create these opportunities for access. Thank you.
Thank you.
If that's all right. I can talk a bit more about my record. I will talk a bit about my record. So in 2012, I was relatively newly elected to the council, and I looked at the city's voter database. I mentioned earlier the need to take a data-informed look at city staffing. I take a data-informed look at everything. It's what I do professionally. I found that in our 3 wards that concentrate our single-family homes, we had 8 voters registered for every 5 in wards 4, 5, and 6, which are dominated by apartment buildings, an 8 to 5 voter registration disparity. That is why I initiated the voting reforms that included 16-year-old voting, and they also included something I brought forward, which is candidate access to door-knock in apartment buildings. I've actually been using that in order to encounter people who are not like me and listen to them and their concerns, not just about the city. Yes, access is extremely important, but I'll reiterate, so is outreach and going to people where they are, not just waiting for people to apply to committees, but actually going out and recruiting them. Just as a resident, I helped recruit 2 people, African Americans, for the city's Task Force on Reimagining Public Safety. This is what I will do as mayor, actively work with my colleagues, with city staff, to work on outreach, to work on inclusion.
Thank you. Would anybody like 30 seconds? Or okay. I don't purposefully focus on Ward 6, but the reality is that big changes are coming to Ward 6 with the construction of the Purple Line light rail quickly coming into sight. How can the city best leverage opportunity from this new transportation feature while advocating for community members and businesses who will be most affected? And I think, are we with? I was first last. You were first last? Oh, no, I think you were, okay, Ms. Searcy. I lost track. We'll just, Ms. Searcy, if you'll.
No worries. So the Purple Line has been something that I've been following for a very long time. And I will say, although Ward 6 has the Tacoma Langley station, Ward 5 has also have been impacted as a result of their Arliss construction as well. A couple of things. One, the Tacoma Langley Crossroads area, particularly University Boulevard and New Hampshire Avenue, has been one of the deadliest intersections for pedestrian safety in the entire state, has been for a very long time. So we've been working nonstop to try to make sure that we make some interim pedestrian safety improvements along University Boulevard. We've been working with state delegates nonstop, as well as Purple Line construction and MDOT. Another big thing is trying to make sure that our businesses that are here today will be able to see the Purple Line actually advance. So we've worked a lot to get grant funds available because a number of businesses were negatively impacted as a result of the construction. Trees also were impacted. We lost all of our major trees. Has worked with Delegate Charkoudian on getting a bill passed, and we have resources now to get some of those trees replanted. But what's most important is making sure that this project, which is designed to help a number of communities that are low to moderate income immigrant populations to see the day that it is built, and protecting affordability along the Purple Line route is something that we have to do going forward. And as your mayor, that's something I will do.
Thank you. Mr. Smith, your thoughts on how we can best leverage this opportunity?
You know, I've been on the council since the Purple Line was, first an idea, and, we're trying to figure out where the stops were going to be. It is going to be critical to make sure the businesses, the people that are going to be directly impacted, have the opportunity to continue to live next to the Purple Line. And the only way that is going to happen is by some type of government subsidy that we're going to have to, not just City of Takoma Park, but the county, the state, will have to step in to protect these businesses and these renters. Because once this Purple Line is open, that property is value is going to go through the roof, and we need to start engaging right now. Now, I've heard from my colleagues about how they're talking to other people in different, levels of government. Let me just say, for the record, that as an elected position on the Maryland Municipal League, I served as vice chair of their legislative committee. I have worked with the governor, chairs of committees. I have access beyond the District 20 delegation. So once it comes time that we need to start really engaging, we need someone at the table that knows people beyond the representatives of Montgomery County. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Grimes?
Purple Line, Tacoma Langley Crossroads, Long Branch, they are wonderful opportunities, and they are also challenges in a number of ways. Every opportunity has challenges associated with it. One opportunity, blank slate. I had a conversation with former University of Maryland President Wallace Lowe a few years ago about, the Purple Line is going to connect us directly to the University of Maryland campus. Might the university consider putting some satellite facilities in Tacoma Langley Crossroads in particular? That's real interesting. I had conversations with BF Saul, which operates the shopping center, the large shopping center that includes Chuck E. Cheese and Starbucks and International Mart. I found them to be complacent because they have great cash flow on that center. But now the value of that center is going way up. I would welcome mixed-use redevelopment there, but we absolutely need to protect current businesses, especially small businesses, including from redevelopment to ensure they continue to have a place in our community. Part of that is through work with other jurisdictions and agencies. So for instance, in my planning board testimony on Thrive 2050, the county's pending general plan update, a couple of years ago, I talked about making both Long Branch and Tacoma Langley Crossroads recognized activity center in Thrive 2050. This is very important to talk to people in all sorts of partners across jurisdictions in offices that are going to be important in making things happen and protecting the current commercial tenants there and residential tenants.
Okay, thank you. Anything to add?
Sure, real quick. I promise I'll be 30 seconds. While I commend my opponent's connections outside of the county and at the state level and the like, we need resources now, and I've worked to get resources to the businesses, state level resources to the businesses now, because if we don't, they will not be here in the next legislative session, right? So I've worked nonstop to secure and testify in Annapolis that brought direct resources into the Tacoma Langley Crossroads now. So it is important for us to keep in mind that sometimes we have to just do what we can to save the people that we are facing right now. They don't have time for zoning discussions. I've had conversations with BF Saul. I've had conversations with JBG. I want to reach the businesses. I've had conversations and worked with the businesses that are in need and want to make sure that they're able to be here and realize the dream of the Purple Line actually taking off. So for me, it's more important that we are keeping in mind the needs of the businesses we have right now and how we can address the issues that they're
Thank you. I think you get I think you have 90 seconds.
Oh, 90 seconds. I'll take it. Yes, the businesses right now need help, but they need a lot more help than what they're getting. And the only way, if you know how Maryland's budget is set, it's set by the governor. It's not set by the General Assembly. So you have to be access to whomever is governor to make sure that you have significant resources that are going to projects like protecting the businesses in or along the Purple Line. Another point, the General Assembly does not look at Montgomery County and Prince George's County as areas that they always want to invest money. They look at Montgomery County as this wealthy county that doesn't need any help. Prince George's County, sometimes. The Governor Hogan did put $200-some million into a hospital in Prince George's County. So you have to make sure your advocacy on bringing money into a corridor that just touches 2 counties goes beyond Montgomery and Prince George's. You got to bring in the city of Baltimore. You got to bring in Howard County. You got to bring in Charles County. You got to bring in other districts, other jurisdictions within the state of Maryland to advocate on your behalf, because if you don't, you're going to get peanuts.
I recognize that I've done a fair share of name dropping in my remarks this evening, but I'm going to drop one more. I was proud to, if you supported Tom Perez or Peter Franchot for governor or one of the other candidates in the Democratic primary, that's cool. Myself, I supported Wes Moore. I canvassed for Wes Moore door to door. I had a strong working relationship. I managed a Montgomery County candidate's campaign. Strong working relationship with Wes Moore's campaign staff here in Montgomery County. Wes, with our votes, will be our next governor, and that's wonderful. So I'm glad to be able to say that. And I say that in particular because I want to amplify what you've been hearing, that these ability to tap resources at all levels is extremely important.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, okay. I hope we can get 2 more questions in, and I came with about 40, I want to ask about our climate change initiative. The city has set a goal to achieve net zero carbon emissions by 2035. Is the city on track? And how can the mayor and council respond urgently to the climate crisis with an eye toward racial and economic equity? Mr. Smith?
This is a critical priority. Climate change, stormwater, water management in this city is a huge issue. Residents tell me about, they've lived in their house 20, 30 years and never had a wet basement, and now all of a sudden they got flooding. And they don't have the money to make these improvements to waterproof their basement. With all big projects like climate change, it's going to take a focus from the mayor and council to make it an agenda priority on, the 2 years that you're on the council. But you also have to make sure that all the departments within the city have buy-in and understand that whatever they do, they have to look at not just climate change and the climate change priorities that we have set, but how do you incorporate that into racial equity? And the only way that is going to happen is with the mayor, council, and senior leadership working together hand in hand. Because if we don't figure this out, and this isn't just for the city of Takoma Park, it's the entire country, it is only going to get worse. And storms like Ian will be stronger and stronger and impact Takoma Park and our neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Grimes?
I'm going to let someone else speak for me for a moment. I have been endorsed in this race by Mike Tidwell, who is, I believe, our region's leading climate advocate. Mike's endorsement quote includes, Seth understands environmental challenges and he knows how to make local government work. As mayor, he will make climate action a top city priority. That's why I'm backing Seth Grimes for mayor of Takoma Park. There's more, but I'll stop there. I actually brought the suggestion that the city enact a climate emergency declaration to the council about 3.5 years ago. It wasn't a hard sell. Montgomery County had done it, but someone needed to push it forward, and I did. After that, I got myself appointed to the Environment Committee, figuring out the responsibility to make things happen. The was a mixed bag. It imploded because of racial equity concerns that the council inadequately addressed. We basically were set up to fail. In the last 2.5 years ago, the city enacted a climate action framework resolution and has not enacted any legislation under it. We need to get moving on legislation. Now, I do recognize that transportation and buildings are the largest contributor to greenhouse gases locally. Those are being addressed at the county level. We have state legislation that I backed for community choice energy, which allows Montgomery County to set up an electric utility. Nonetheless, we need to accelerate electrification here in Takoma Park, and that is by providing resources to homeowners to electrify using the Biden administration's Inflation Reduction Act resources. So I would accelerate our address of climate change.
Thank you. Ms. Searcy?
Great. Thank you. So for me, I would agree that we haven't moved the needle. And I agree that our two prime sources are transportation and buildings, but I disagree that our county is addressing these issues. I've worked with multifamily property owners and understand, particularly for those multifamily property owners that tailor housing for lower income individuals, that piecing together the funding necessary to make the substantial building improvements that are needed to advance energy efficiency is very hard. You know, it's not enough to say just go to the green bank. There's a lot more that we have to do. Our infrastructure is quite old. So to bring all of these different piles of money together is very labor intensive, and in many cases, they're often working on shoestring budgets to begin with because their focus is not profit maximization. They're to create housing for people who want to be housed. So I work with the county and work with the state to try to figure out how to streamline those funding resources so our multifamily buildings can have easier access to resources to make the substantial upgrades that they need to make. Also to address the impacts of climate change. So how can we address stormwater issues on private property? How can we create resources for people who are struggling due to climate change? Those are some of the things that I would focus on if elected as mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Smith, any clarifications on this issue?
I would just say that, you know, you can have all the financing sources out there, but just like affordable housing, it requires subsidy, government subsidy. That's the only way you can solve something, a challenge as big as climate change, stormwater. Government has to come in, whether it's state, the feds, and I work on the IRA bill, so I appreciate you mentioning that. Everybody has to come in and bring actual dollars to the table to help residents around the country. I mean, this is a huge issue that threatens all of us. And if we don't figure it out quickly, and especially those people that are most vulnerable, that are not living in single-family homes, that are living in apartments, they're going to need even more help. And their owners, the landlords, they have no clue what they're doing. So we're going to have to provide the human capital and the treasure to make a difference in climate change. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Grimes.
There's an element that I've spoken about earlier this evening that I'll mention again now. which is that we haven't done a good job in recent years as a city in tapping the talent, the enthusiasm, the passion, the knowledge of community members in solving problems. That's been a bit frustrating for some of the community members. I'll point to, in particular, the members of the Climate Action Coffee, which is an offshoot of something called Tally within the Takoma Park Mobilization, which I co-founded, but anyway. They have a stormwater group that has issued a report that is not getting the traction with the city that it should. Another subgroup has been struggling for something like 2 years to create a pollinator garden in the Dorothy's Woods property that the city purchased a number of years ago in the lawn portion of it. We haven't tapped their talent and enthusiasm, and we should. They have come up with wonderful ideas, and they have the expertise to help us carry it out, with, of course, special attention to equity to make sure that the benefits are being spread across the city and that every constituency in the city is being consulted and involved in these projects. That's a fundamental change to our approach to city government that I would pursue moving forward for climate action and for just about everything else.
Thank you. Any other comments on this topic? Okay, let's move to our final question, and boy, I really wish we had a lot more time. But let's see, where are we at? I think Mr. Grimes. So a big part of the mayor's job is working to pull together neighborhoods, groups, and communities, which may have some differences in how they look at issues. Can you provide examples of when you have worked collaboratively to advance goals, initiatives, or legislation?
Thank you for a softball question. Yeah, I'll provide a great example. When I was on the council, we all know the Takoma Park Presbyterian Church in my neighborhood. It's around the corner from me. The church elders thought, well, how can we contribute back to our own immediate community? And they looked at their facility, and they had a disused commercial kitchen. And they decided it would be a great idea to reopen this kitchen to the community, to food entrepreneurs. I participated in 2 years of meetings as a member of the core group, even while I was on the council, to make this happen. It happened with also the participation of now Delegate Lord Charkoudian, and it is a wonderful contributor. But it faced a lot of suspicion from people in the neighborhood about parking, about rats, about trash collection, and all this. Those fears, well, we needed to address them, and we did address them through the business plan and compromise. So that is bringing people together to enable us to do infill development, essentially, to make greater use of a facility in our neighborhoods, to promote local food production from locally sourced food, to provide entrepreneurial opportunities through fractional time use of this kitchen, aligned with the Crossroads Community Food Network's Crossroads Farmers Market. And this bridged the community, it bridged doubters to make something great happen.
Thank you. Ms. Searcy?
Sure, I have lots of examples of that. One is I'm going to talk about Hillwood Manor Playground. So a number of residents came to me and they said, Talisha, our playground is old, it's a county playground. How can we get a new playground? And we went down this path of meeting with nonprofit organizations. And they said, well, you can raise some money, and that's how you can give it to the county, you can give it through this foundation, and that's how you're gonna be able to do it. We're just like, no, we don't have money for that. This is a county playground, you all should create it for us. And so we took a multi-pronged approach. We recorded residents and their plea for a new county playground. We shared that information with our county council. I met with members of county council. I met with Casey Anderson, brought him down with his staff, met with the playground manager, and we all just kind of came together. Playground managers, county staff, our public works department, there's a couple of residents, and we said, see, look, it's flooded, the streets are flooded, we need a new playground. And then finally they said, you know what? We agree. Okay. Now, 2 years later, there was a whole pandemic, but on November the 6th, we will have a ribbon cutting for that playground, and it will be one of the largest playgrounds in Down County. And it was because of residents coming together with county staff, coming together with city staff to come up with a workable solution.
Thank you. Mr. Smith?
Yeah, I would like to talk about a couple of things and then talk about my experience trying to have a county playground renovated. First, when the last time we did redistricting, Essex House Apartments was brought into Ward 5. I had a meeting with residents. They said that the one thing that they would really like to see is more programming for children. That was the impetus to create Lunch and Learn. Lunch and Learn has been around for 9 years. It's a 6-week summer program. It's run by Doris Duarte and Jackie Frazier and other members of the community. There's now a board of directors. It is 100% free. It provides tutoring services for kids. These kids primarily live in apartment buildings. We provide transportation. People get to go on they go to like the aquarium or some of the museums in DC. When I first started this program, the only group that would really help bring money into it was when Ike Leggett was county executive, and he gave us money for transportation. Other thing I would like to say is Flower Avenue Green Street project. I did not create it, but there was a resolution in place that said that the city could not put money into it. Once I got that resolution overturned, the city was able to go and get TAP funding. So now we have this incredible Green Street project. And then finally, residents came to me about a playground at Sligo. I was told by senior staff, you cannot make these improvements and don't
Thank you.
pursue this.
Thank you. Did you wanted to add something?
Sure, 30.
Sure. Hold, give me a second here. I just refigured everything. Okay.
The key to successful city service is collaboration with colleagues, city staff, with community members. I had the privilege of serving as Tacoma Park's representative on the Metropolitan Washington Regional Transportation Planning Board for 3.5 years. As a planning board member, I became aware of the Transportation Alternatives Program, and I brought the opportunity to city staff who applied for funding for 2 projects, Flower Avenue Green Street and the Ethan Allen Gateway project, and they applied. It turned out that Tacoma Park was the only applicant that year, and we won $2.3 million in project funding, which I had the pleasure of voting for in the Transportation Planning Board.
Thank you. Any further comments?
Sure. I'll just take a quick 30 seconds. I will say I was also told no when it came to the Hillwood Manor Playground. I was told no. City staff was like, Talisha, I don't think this is going to happen. You're too low on the queue. I was told no by county staff. They were like, nope, it's not. Yeah, no, our budget, no. I don't take no for an answer. And I kept emailing, and I kept calling, and I kept emailing. So your mayor has to be a person that won't accept no for an answer.
Yeah, I appreciate my colleague saying that she doesn't accept no, but you know, it's different when you actually can get a project considered, talked about from the dais by the city manager and your colleagues. I couldn't even get that. It was completely shut down, and I was told that this is not going to happen and do not pursue it.
All right, let's leave. Thank you very much. Now, I have actually a 10-second question, which is, if residents, voters would like to know more about you, what are your web addresses? Let's start with you, Mr. Grimes.
SethGrimes.org. You can also find me on Twitter. It's a great way to see my positions over the years at Seth4, the numeral 4MC, Seth4MC.
Thank you, Eric. My website is smithfortacomapark.com. Twitter is Jarrett Smith. Instagram, I think it's Jarrett Smith, but Facebook is Jarrett K. Smith. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I am looking at my comms person, and she's going to kill me because I don't know my social media. My website is Talisha, the number 4, Takoma.com. And you can connect to all of the socials and things from there. Talisha, the number 4, Takoma.
Okay, so let's move to closing statements, and we'll end in the same order in which we began. So that's Mr. Smith, Mr. Grimes, and Ms. Searcy. So whenever you're ready.
Eric, I have to say once again, thank you so much for organizing this forum. I want to thank all the residents for coming out. I love to talk about policy. I do this in my day job, so I appreciate everybody spending the time with me. You haven't started the clock, but that's okay. I'll take some extra time. This is a critical election, you know. It is going to have a lot of impacts on the budget, our fiscal position for the city of Takoma Park. It is going to define the services that we provide residents in this city. And you're going to have to decide, does it make sense to have a huge tax increase? Or do you want to see your future mayor, your future council make some hard decisions and actually start reining in this budget? We can't afford to move forward the way that we currently are in this city. There's just not enough money. We were blessed that the federal government came and helped us during the pandemic, and we got ARPA money, we got the emergency pandemic money to plug up the holes that we had in our budget, but that money's over. That's gone. We're not getting any more money. There isn't any more rescues in the back that we can say, oh, well, you know, don't worry, residents of Takoma Park, the federal government is going to save you. That's over. So we need to make sure as a community that we can sustain ourselves. You know, one thing that when I first was on the council, we would do, you know, these planning of things that might happen in the city that, you know, might be an emergency. We never planned for a pandemic. We never planned that a large swath of our residents wouldn't have jobs. We never planned for any of these things that we've experienced for the last 2 years. So that tells me that we need to make sure that our fiscal house is in order, and I have the experience and I can provide the leadership that this city needs as its next mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Grimes?
It's been a wonderful opportunity to talk about issues and about what I can and will bring to the city of Takoma Park as mayor. So I do ask your vote. Thank you, Eric, for moderating this evening, and to my colleagues for participating in this process. It's wonderful to be able to do this. If you do go to my website, sethgrimes.org, I'll put it out there again, you'll see a tagline underneath my logo, which is Proven, Progressive, Uniter, Leader. What do I mean by all this? Proven in terms of passing legislation, safe grow voting reforms that include 16-year-old voting, candidate access to apartment buildings. The city's polystyrene food service were banned first in the state of Maryland. Other routine things like getting a new crosswalk in at Takoma Park after the State Highway Administration tried to cancel funding twice, and I personally reached out and got the help of then Delegate Sheila Hickson and then State Senator Jamie Raskin to make that happen. Progressive. I have worked extensively with progressive organizations regionally and nationally on immigration, policing, and justice reform, and bring the lessons and relationships and knowledge that I've gained there here home to Takoma Park, where these are all issues, dealing with poverty, dealing with homelessness, dealing with hunger. I am a dedicated progressive uniter. I talk to the people in Takoma community vision for Tacoma, the anti-Tacoma Junction Development Project side. I talk to people in Tacoma for All, the pro-development people. I talk to people who aren't on any side, and I feel uniquely situated to try, and I will make a priority of reuniting our community around common shared goals. And leader. I have the discipline, I've applied it in the past on the council to make hard choices on budget, on taxes, on staffing, but also to inspire people to become involved in city government, to ensure that everyone is included. That's what leadership is about for me and what I will bring to the city as mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Grimes. And Ms. Searcy?
Thank you so much, Eric. You've heard a lot tonight about the challenges. But I want to be your mayor because I believe we can do this. In Takoma Park, we can put equity first. We can make sure that everyone has a safe and supported community, regardless of their race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender identity, or immigration status. In Takoma Park, we can develop. We can do it. We can grow our community in novel ways that diversifies our tax base with sustainable green solutions, affordable housing, mixed use, and support for our small businesses. In Takoma Park, we can support our residents. The pandemic has taught us that there are so many people in our community that are struggling day to day. And we can implement programs that address mental health needs, food insecurity. We can protect our families during times of crisis. We could do that here. In Takoma Park, we can provide an inclusive city service. We can make sure that our library, our recreation center, is the resource that so many in our youth need this right now. They need it. They're struggling. They've been struggling. And so we have to do what we need to do to provide those resources for people. And with me as your mayor, we could do all these things together through partnership, through collaboration. And so if you believe in my vision for the city of Takoma Park, I would like to ask for your vote. And please look for more information at TalishaForTacoma.com. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank all of you. As I've mentioned several times, I developed far more questions than I was able to get to. If you'd like, I can send them to you as in the form of a questionnaire.
Another one?
I want to thank community members who reached out to me with questions. I did try to get to as many as I could, and my apologies if I was not able to get to your question. Again, thank you, candidates, for making time to come together with me and the residents of your city this evening. Many thanks to viewers, and special thanks to Tacoma Park City Clerk Jesse Carpenter and the crew of Tacoma TV, Bienvenidos Martinez and Alvaro Calabia, for supporting once again this election forum. This forum will be rebroadcast on Takoma Radio at 1 p.m. this coming Sunday, and I'm sure that Takoma TV will be working it into their schedule. So everyone, have a good night.
Good to see you, sir. Good to see you.